3. Now, the Labour Party has suspended Ken Livingstone from holding office for another year. These are over the comments that he made about Adolf Hitler and Zionism. Let's speak to Ken Livingstone, former Mayor of London. And now, Ken, good evening to you, sir.
Hi there.
So are you... What are you, a suspended member? Is your membership totally gone now? What's the status?
No, my membership isn't suspended. It's just that I'm not allowed to seek office, so I can't stand as an MP or a councillor or for Labour's NEC. But I can take part in meetings again, go out and campaign for Labour candidates and things like that.
So the suspension that was in place has now gone. You're just now barred from holding office for 1 year.
Yeah, and I mean, basically most people expected I was going to be expelled, but I think the Labour Party's legal team must have been briefing them that if I was expelled and then went for judicial review, they didn't have a cat and mouse chance of winning.
Didn't you think you were going to be expelled, though, Ken?
Pardon?
Did you think you were going to be expelled?
Oh, yes, because I think the whole thing was set up. When I made that comment, I was answering a question I was asked by Vanessa Phelps, is what Hitler did legal? I dismissed it in about 35 words because I didn't think there's any relevance of what Adolf Hitler did to the discussion we were having about, is there a problem of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? And then you had 39 Labour MPs, all of whom wanted to get rid of Jeremy, screaming that I was a Nazi apologist, I was anti-Semitic, and most dishonest of all, saying that I'd said Hitler was a Zionist, which is a completely different thing.
You said he was supporting Zionism.
Well, he did. He signed an agreement in 1933 with the German Zionist movement, which was about moving Germany's Jewish community to Palestine. Later on, he agreed to sell them Mauser pistols. He introduced a law that said the only flags that can be flown in Germany were the Nazi swastika and Star David. And, a lot more, actually. There was a working relationship through those 6 years. And even when the British government banned Jewish refugees from entering Palestine, the Germans collaborated with the Zionist movement to smuggle 10,000 more German Jews into Palestine. So I think that's a pretty solid working relationship.
So is there nothing in those comments that you would apologise for or withdraw or say differently today?
Well, if anybody was upset, of course I'm sorry about that, but I was really struck by the number of Jewish people who came up to me and said, don't these MPs read their history? Don't they know what you said is true? The trouble is, and if you look at the President of the Board of Deputies of British Jews saying to the House of Commons Home Affairs Committee that for Ken Livingstone to have said it was a Zionist is deeply offensive. I don't think that the Chairman of the Board of Deputies is deliberately lying. You just had to go on the Jewish Chronicle website, and it didn't just say I said Hitler was a Zionist. They also said I'd said that Jews were like Nazis. And a week later, they said that I'd said it wasn't anti-Semitic to hate the Jews in Israel. So it's these complete lies. Talk about fake news. This was pretty unpleasant.
But obviously the disciplinary panel felt you've done something because they've stopped you from holding office. So what is it they feel you've done wrong?
They said I shouldn't have said that to Vanessa Phelps. And also they said I shouldn't have been defending Naz Shah. But if Naz Shah was anti-Semitic, she wouldn't have been readmitted to the Labour Party. She said some things that were rude, they were over the top. She was very angry because at the time in 2014, Israel was having a really unpleasant bombing campaign against Gaza, and hundreds, if not thousands, of innocent people were being killed.
So so their position, the disciplinary panel's position, is that they're more miffed about you supporting Naz Shah than they are about your subsequent comments on Zionism and Hitler.
Well, yeah, I have to say, I think that they would have liked to expel me because the panel was 2 right-wingers and 1 left-winger. But I just think they were being told by their barrister and their solicitor that, if you expel him and he goes to the courts, they're just going to, slap you down.
Do you think there is an anti-Semitism problem in the Labour Party, Ken?
Well, look, 80 Jewish members of the Labour Party wrote to The Guardian last year saying in all their hundreds of years in the party that none of them had ever heard an anti-Semitic comment or seen an anti-Semitic incident, and in my 48 years, I never have. It's only been since Jeremy came to power that this was one of the attacks all the old Blairites were making. And as soon as the elections for the local government were over, they moved on to starting to blame Jeremy because we voted for Brexit. I mean, I think most Labour MPs have recognised now they can't get rid of Jeremy, and they've stopped all this backstabbing, but there are a few that, can't seem to come to terms with the Labour Party members' decision.
Were you planning on holding office anyway in the next year?
No, only when I lost the last election to Boris, in my concession speech, I basically said I was retiring, and my wife went off and got a degree and became a teacher, and I'm the house husband. I get the kids up in the morning, walk the dog, do the shopping and the cleaning. I'm like my mum in the 1950s.
Sure, I saw you scrubbing a step the other morning, Ken, when I went past.
No, we've got a Hoover now.
Only just. Ken Livingstone, thank you, sir. Former Mayor of London. Ken Livingstone on the outcome of that disciplinary panel. Labour Party suspending Ken Livingstone from holding office for another year over comments he made about Adolf Hitler and Zionism. I have to say, I always thought Ken was fairly bonkers on most issues, politically and otherwise, that he said, but I never really believed that he was an anti-Semite. I know that's going to divide the room, and there'll be lots of people listening to this, but as Ken Livingstone rightly said there were many Jews that also wrote very passionate letters saying, hang on, let's just have some perspective here. Ken Livingstone might be a lot of things. An anti-Semite, that's just a bit silly. I think that's probably where we're at on this. That said, the disciplinary panel have still upheld 3 charges of breaching party rules. 0345 6060 973. We'll take some more of your calls on this in just a second as well. Thoughts on whether you think Ken Livingstone is probably been meted out a reasonable... Is that reasonable? The Labour Party needed to be seen to do something. They had to kind of take action in some respects, but not branding him an anti-Semite. Come on, does anyone seriously think Ken Livingstone is like calling Tony Benn a racist? I mean, it's just daft, surely. 0345 6060 973. Before we go any further, let's get the latest news headlines from Paul Smith.
This is LBC with Ian Collins.
Leading Britain's conversation, lots of different views and calls and comments to come in on this one, the National Trust, and is it the removal of Christianity, the removal of the word Easter? It is fair to say that in other aspects of the National Trust's website there are many references to Easter, and there always was, but this was specifically about the Cadbury-sponsored Easter egg hunt, which became very quickly, for this year, for the first time, just the egg hunt, nothing to do with the Easter egg hunt, because the word Easter went. We'll take some more comment on that. Keep emailing and texting through as well. From Christianity to Judaism, or those that have a problem with Judaism, anti-Semites. Ken Livingstone is not an anti-Semite. Nobody's found him guilty of that, but he has been told he can't stand or hold office for the next year within the Labour Party over those comments made about Adolf Hitler and Zionism. This is on the back of the MP Naz Shah's comments. He was really speaking on the back of that. So he answered a question, essentially. Ken Livingstone, anti-Semite? Come on. Don't go away, Ambrosine, with you in a second. Sue in Cheam, what are your thoughts, Sue?
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
Anti-Semite, never in a million years would I ever believe that Ken Livingstone would be anti-Semite. He's not that type of chap. But what I want to know is, when are the people who are spreading these lies about him going to be called to account? Because he's been hauled over the coals over this, and they're getting away scot-free, and it just seems totally wrong to me. And it just seemed like a complete setup from start to finish.
So making such grave allegations up about someone should be as bad as somebody actually coming out with this stuff, if at all they had, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've got defamation laws and all this.
Yeah.
But there should be some, it doesn't have to be sort of a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but there does need to be some sort of sanctions against people who spread these rumours, because it's totally unfair, and it's taking up a whole chunk of his life and everybody else's life having to deal with them.
Are you coming at this completely objectively? Do you have a kind of dog in the race, as they say on this? Are you a member of the Labour Party? Are you Jewish? Are you? Where's your own stance or background on this?
Well, I'm just in favour of fair play. I don't have any particular axe to grind on these.
Okay.
It just seems so unfair that this can go on, and then everybody Ken's, been castigated for whatever, and then they all walk away with, wash their hands, and off they go and play again and try and find another victim. And it just seems so unfair to me. British fair play is what we need in this situation, I think.
So stay there, don't go away. Let me bring in Ambrosine. Ambrosine in Finchley, good evening to you. I know you've been running a monitoring site looking at anti-Semitism. What are your thoughts then on this evening's news about Ken Livingstone not suspended from the party, not kicked out of the party, but told he can't run for office for a year?
Well, it's interesting to hear your caller, because I believe that a lot of people do not know the working definition of what anti-Semitism is, and that working definition is what the government uses to define what anti-Semitism is.
So what is that working definition, loosely?
So I'll give you a few so you'll understand. And under that definition, Ken Livingstone, in my belief, I won't say that he is, but under my belief, I believe he is anti-Semitic. So let's go through the working definition here. So the first one is accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations. Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavour. Applying double standards by requiring... Did he say
that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavour?
Yes. Drawing comparisons of...
Well, hang on, you say... Where did he say that, Ambrosine? I'm not aware of him saying that.
We've been monitoring Ken Livingstone's words over the years, and if we're talking about Ken Livingstone being anti-Semitic, then over the past years within the Labour Party, this is what he's been doing. One of the most important parts is this, holding Jews, he talks about the Board of Deputies quite a lot, holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the State of Israel. And the last one that I will bring up is making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, stereotypical allegations about Jews, and we're hearing about his connections between Zionism and Hitler, as such as the power of Jews as a collective, such as especially, but not exclusively, the myth about a world...
Okay. All right, it's kind of like a lot of sort of vague legal speak in that. Let me put this back to Sue in Cheam. Sue, Ambrosine appears to have been monitoring this quite closely over the last few years and comes to a different conclusion to you, Sue.
I should say she has. My goodness. The thing is, if this is historical fact, when did the truth ever stop being the truth? And if he's just telling something, and if he was asked the question by Vanessa Feltz, and he answered her in his own honest opinion, when is that ever wrong to tell the truth? I don't understand. Let's not rewrite history here. And let me just say this. If people didn't make such a fuss about every little dot and comma in a conversation, people wouldn't even notice. It would all just pass straight by, just like a river flowing past.
Ambrosine, answer that.
Well, it doesn't, unfortunately, because if you actually look at his comments, because he's a tweeter, he's a social media person. If you actually look at his comments on social media, underneath the comments, we're seeing a rife of anti-Semitic messages. And can I just go
That's not his fault, is it? That doesn't make him an anti-Semite.
Well, he is a conspiracy theorist. He is actually
Well, he could be a conspiracy that doesn't make him an anti-Semite, though, does it?
No, but when you post lies and mistruths about the Second World War, about the Holocaust, about the Nazis, this is what is deemed to be a conspiracy theory. Look, Holocaust organisations in the UK and around the world have got historical facts about what has been happening before the Holocaust, during and after. There is nothing that Ken Livingstone has said that is absolutely true. And can I just go back to your previous...
But he can be wrong, can't he? I mean, he can be wrong. Well, he could make... he could be historically inaccurate, but still not be an anti-Semite. That's the point you're missing, isn't it?
Well, first of all, we've got over 52 suspended and reinstated councillors, Momentum members, Labour Party members, over since Jeremy Corbyn took leadership for posting anti-Semitic, inverted commas, anti-Semitic posts. That's about 52 people. I've got a whole list here. Now, the one thing that people keep bringing up is Naz Shah. Now, Naz Shah was somebody who did post anti-Semitic rhetoric. She was given an apology. She apologized over the anti-Semitism because she said she didn't know anti-Semitism was racism. The Jewish Labour Party forgave her. Now, that's what happens here. Ken Livingstone, unfortunately, doesn't realise that what comes out of
She was suspended, of course.
She was suspended, like he has, like many of them.
Yeah.
You know,
but you'd be kicked out if it was proven that you were anti-Semitic. You'd be kicked out the Labour Party, surely.
Well, look, we've had an inquiry by Shami Chakrabarti. We believe it was a whitewash, and now what I've seen posted is that the head of Jewish Labour, the Jewish Labour Party, the organisation that runs the Jewish Labour, has said that they're actually going to hold their own inquiry. So that's something that's.
Let me just put this back to you, Sue. I mean, whatever the rights and wrongs of the Ken Livingstone story here, the wider issue, as Ambrosine points out, there are other members of the Labour Party who have apparently been anti-Semitic, and there's suspicion or accusation that they've behaved inappropriately. So there is an issue here, Sue.
Well, you know, if people are obviously able to identify specific issues that are anti-Semitic, then fair enough. But it just seems, you know, be selective in what you want to protest about, because if something that's as innocuous as just a throwaway remark that's to do with history and recorded history, I think pick on the
Go on, Ambrosine.
your issues.
It's not a throwaway remark. If I actually brought up some time in history and changed that history and flung that back to you, you would actually say to me, well, that didn't take place. That obviously is wrong. You know, this happened.
But that doesn't make you full of hate, Ambrosine, does it? It might mean you're wrong and historically out of line.
Yes, but the thing with Ken Livingstone is that you and others have actually brought him up on the actual things that he said and said, well, this doesn't make sense. This isn't a part of history. This didn't happen, but he doesn't apologise. He has his own...
He said sorry just on this programme 20 minutes ago. He said, if I've upset somebody, I'm sorry.
Well, he said if he upset somebody, he's sorry, but he hasn't taken back the facts that he's actually put out there, that Adolf Hitler aligned himself with the Zionists, inverted commas, the Jews, during the Second World War. The whole point of it is that he doesn't realise that what he's saying is a mistruth. It's a conspiracy.
But when he said Adolf Hitler went mad and killed 6 million Jews, I mean, that's not a man in denial of the Holocaust, or who's responsible.
Well, I think anybody that has annihilated a people, 6 million Jewish people,
But Ken acknowledged that in that very same breath when others were accusing him of being anti-Semitic. Within that very statement, he also talked about Hitler being a madman who killed 6 million Jews.
But as I stated before, there is a reason why we have a working definition of anti-Semitism. And if we keep saying to ourselves, well, this isn't anti-Semitic, and that isn't, then what we're going to come down to is...
But isn't that the whole area of what is offensive? And we talk about this nightly. There's always going to be a subjective element, is there not, to some of these issues? You know, we see it with sexuality, with race, with gender, with all sorts of things, and, of course, with religion.
It's a revision. The problem is, it's a revisionism that is happening. It's
Is he a revisionist? Is Ken a revisionist? We'll leave that one hanging, Ambrosine, only because we hit the clock. Sue as well, Sue and Cheam, thank you both for starting this one off. It is rather interesting how it does kind of divide the room, and I'll just reiterate what I said right on the back of that little conversation we had with Ken Livingstone a moment ago here on LBC, that I've always thought Ken is mostly bonkers, but I've never thought he's a mad racist or an anti-Semite. In fact, that's almost the last thing I could accuse Ken Livingstone of being, frankly. You may wish to disagree on that, and Ambrosine has a wider definition of what makes an anti-Semite, and she believes Ken Livingstone falls right within it. 0345 60 60 973. You're listening to Late Nights with Ian Collins, LBC.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Ian Collins on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
You see, I'm kind of with Tony on this one. He's just sent this tweet. He says, the only people Ken and Corbyn are guilty of being anti are the British. They're not racist or anti-Semitic. And it would just seem rather... I know there is that sort of view. I mean, bearing in mind there's the whole kind of Jewish Friends of Labour or Israel Friends of Labour. There's all sorts of affiliations that the Labour Party have had, very proud and over a long period of time, with Jews, with Israel, with all sorts of different groups within that entire spectrum of discussion, area, religion, faith or locality. That's long been established. It would seem extraordinary that anybody that sits within that area politically of the Labour Party, the Ken and the Jeremy sort of department, would be a racist or an anti-Semite. I remember the first time I was aware of this Labour story. I know there are some people in that position, of course, that almost go full circle in the sense that they see some kind of, conspiracy, some sort of cabal taking place that is Israeli/Zionist-led, and that is having an influence, and the Palestinian question, of course, creeps in there as well. So I guess it sort of springboards from that department. But broadly speaking, if you look at the sort of philosophy of people who are in the political space that the likes of Corbyn and Ken Livingstone occupy, it would be sort of rather extraordinary if in their heart they were anti-Semites. Don't go away, Thomas, with you in a second. David is over here in Boreham Wood. What are your thoughts, David? Hello.
Hi, good evening. I just want to point out that Mr. Livingstone seems to have a penchant for twisting the facts.
Go on.
He pointed out about flying the Nazi or German flag in the 1930s. What you have to realise is that becomes a cultural thing to do in Germany to celebrate national holidays, etc. Now, if you don't fly the flag and you're of the Jewish faith or you're of a minority that's being persecuted, so you're banned from flying the flag, then that makes you a target for the baying mob to come and attack you.
Right.
So Ken's sort of presenting the fact that Jews could fly the Star of David as if they had equal rights to Germans in the 1930s. Not true.
Is that the way
about them becoming a target?
Yeah, I mean, I totally hear what you're saying, David. But is that with respect to your own opinion? Is that the projection you're putting on? Is that the gloss you're applying to it?
It's not a gloss I'm applying. That's the fact that I've always been taught.
No, I agree. But Ken, of course, would robustly deny that.
I'm not applying a gloss. Now, you see, I truly believe that Ken does apply, if you like, to use your term, a gloss to the facts and twist it in a anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli stance. And if the Labour Party truly believed that they had zero tolerance towards anti-Semitism, then they would have expelled him.
But that just becomes a sort of kangaroo court then, doesn't it? Because they'd be saying, well, let's expel Ken Livingstone because people like David like to think he's an anti-Semite.
I don't like to think. I think he is an anti-Semite.
No, you're entitled to think that as well. But, I mean, is that the gallery they're going to play to? They've come to a different conclusion. They felt that his behaviour was engaged in conduct which, in the opinion of the NEC, is prejudicial, or in any act in which the opinion of the NEC is grossly detrimental to the party, etc. So they've marked out the reasoning why he's been told that for the next year he can't hold office, but they've certainly stopped short of believing that he's an anti-Semite. Why would they not want to say he's an anti-Semite if he was an anti-Semite?
Maybe there's another agenda that we're not aware of.
Let me stay there, David. Don't go in. Let me bring in Thomas in Worthing. Well, just to address, Thomas, if you would, David's last point there, that who believes that Ken Livingstone is an anti-Semite. Do you concur with that or not?
I'd agree with it completely, to be honest. I think that there's a wider problem that the Labour Party still aren't tackling. They've had a sequence of councillors and elected representatives who have made very offensive comments. There's one in Birmingham that I won't name by name, but he came out with the statement, if you want to know what extremism and terrorism is, you go and look at what the Israelis are doing to those civilians in Palestine. That was condemned by the Labour Party, but he's still a serving councillor for the Labour Party.
But you can believe that, can't you? You can have a massive problem with Israel's foreign policy. Still doesn't make you an anti-Semite.
Well, comparing it to terrorism, international terrorism.
Well, if you want to, that still doesn't make you an anti-Semite. That just makes you somebody who has an opinion on Israeli foreign policy. That's Israel the country rather than Judaism the religion.
Let me give you another very brief example. A couple of years ago, UKIP MEP Bill Etheridge made a comment about Adolf Hitler being an accomplished orator at his time. He wasn't praising him as an individual, his attitude to what he did in history, but he said he was an accomplished orator. The political establishment absolutely rounded on him. The media absolutely rounded on him. Labour Party were demanding that he...
Anyone who knows their history should know that Adolf Hitler was an accomplished orator and a very seductive leader, hence the reason why he was. Remember, pre-Holocaust, Adolf Hitler was an elected leader of that country, and that included people from all backgrounds who voted the man into office. His levels of efficiency and fluency and his ability to speak and seduce were at the time fairly unparalleled.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is that if you look at the reaction from Labour Party supporters, a large chunk of them on social networking sites, they are absolutely reinforcing what Ken Livingstone has said from top to bottom, and you didn't see that kind of defence or civilised debate surrounding what Bill Etheridge said. And I find stark hypocrisy absolutely disgusting, and that's a wider problem that really isn't being debated in the Labour Party. And you don't have to look any further than Luciana Berger, the MP for the Labour Party, on Twitter tonight. She's disgusted, and so am I.
Well, Thomas, OK, you've made that absolutely clear. I just put this back to you, David, of course. There are lots of other Labour MPs, Jewish politicians and Jewish members of the Labour Party who aren't offended, whatever Luciana Berger, as Thomas just alluded to. There are many that, and Ken Livingstone cited the 70-odd who, I think, wrote to The Guardian and said, this is clearly a nonsense what's going on here. What are those guys seeing that you're not, David?
Well, I can't say because I'm not in their shoes. All I can say is, from my own shoes, I believe the man comes up with some quite offensive and twisted facts. And the Labour Party had an opportunity to demonstrate that they do have a zero tolerance towards anti-Semitism, and they've missed the mark.
All right. David and Thomas in Worthing, thank you very much indeed. Interesting calls coming in on this one, as you might imagine. We're talking about this man.
Well, if anybody was upset, of course, I'm sorry about that, but I was really struck by the number of Jewish people who came up to me and said, don't these MPs read their history? Don't they know what you said is true?
That's Ken Livingstone speaking to me around about half an hour ago after the disciplinary panel upheld 3 charges of him breaching party rules. They've suspended him from holding office for another year over comments he made about Adolf Hitler and Zionism. Was he guilty of being sloppy with his language? Perhaps. But is he an anti-Semite? Ken Livingstone? An anti-Semite? Come on. 0345 6060 973.
On FM, online, on your mobile, and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC. This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation with Ian Collins.
It is a curious area when we talk about anti-Semitism, and I think essentially because the Holocaust element, which is correctly identified as being the driving force within and behind this entire debate, it of course does from time to time cross our news agenda, and there are, as we know, some rather offensive conspiracy theories that we talked about. Was it David Irving, wasn't it? The revisionist who was famously taken to court and found himself essentially skint, and his any reputation he did have beforehand obliterated as a result of his position on the Holocaust. Total denial of that. So that, I think you could reasonably construct an argument to say, that's anti-Semitism as I recognise it. People who have a view that the Jews run the world, that might be a stereotype, it might be a bit offensive to some people. That would be in a different ballpark to the David Irving kind of comments, I think we could reasonably say. Then you've got people who just have a problem with Israel's foreign policy, and that is not anti-Semitic in itself. Lots of people might have a problem with Israel's foreign policy, and if they want to align that to terrorism, why shouldn't they if they want to? Plenty of people align the British government's actions in other countries to terrorism. There's not a night goes past when somebody doesn't talk about our government and our foreign policy being akin to war crimes. There's already a mobilised movement that want to put our former Prime Minister in the dock at The Hague for such offences. So to call on a country as being a terrorist no better than a terrorist outfit, that isn't anti-Semitic either. To have a belief or a different belief in the way history pans out, or some elements of, well, that probably makes you either perhaps at best a little bit inaccurate in some places, and at worst just a bit daft in others. And perhaps Ken Livingstone falls somewhere in that department. As an anti-Semite, somebody who doesn't like Jews, who has a wholesale problem with Jews, I would struggle to think that Ken Livingstone has managed a political career. This guy's been around since I've been alive. He ran the GLA, the GLC, Mayor of London, of course, on a couple of occasions. He's on top of that, famously thorn in the backside of the Labour front bench while he sat on the Labour back benches. He's been suspended. He's got, in all of that time, it would be extraordinary if he'd not had to work very up close and personal with quite a lot of fairly prominent Jewish leaders, MPs, administrators, crossing paths with leaders, counterparts from other countries. It would be a rather strange existence for Ken Livingstone, for him to be an unequivocal, no doubt about it, anti-Semite. Luciana Berger, the Labour MP, wrote a little tweet earlier on this evening on the back of this story that the Labour Party have suspended Ken Livingstone from holding office, but they haven't thrown him out the Labour Party. She wrote, "A new low for my party this evening. Appalling decision. Why is anti-Semitism being treated differently from any other form of racism?" Well, probably because it's not been regarded as anti-Semitic. That would be the answer. Are there anti-Semites in the Labour Party? Yes. Is Ken Livingstone one of them based on this? No. 0345 6060 973. So earlier, Ken spoke with me around about 40 minutes ago, not long after that disciplinary panel told him that he couldn't run for office for the next year. This was his response when I asked him what he thought, whether he thought he was going to be removed from the party.
I mean, because I think the whole thing was set up. I mean, when I made that comment, I was answering a question I was asked by Vanessa Phelps, is what Hitler did legal? I dismissed it in about 35 words because I didn't think there's any relevance of what Adolf Hitler did to the discussion we were having about, is there a problem of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? And then you had 39 Labour MPs, all of whom wanted to get rid of Jeremy, screaming that I was a Nazi apologist, I was anti-Semitic, and most dishonest of all, saying that I'd said Hitler was a Zionist, which is a completely different thing.
Of course, what he said was Hitler was supporting Zionism before he went mad and killed 6 million Jews. They were Ken Livingstone's words. 0345 6060 973. Don't go away, Dave. With you in a second. Let's go to Wharton in Lancashire. Matthew, what are your thoughts, Matthew? Good evening.
Hello. It's one of these where, yes, it was an uncomfortable alliance between Hitler and the Zionists, but the Zionists wanted to reinstate the state of Israel in the Middle East in the form of Israeli territories, which is now, was Palestine, so on and so forth. It was an uneasy alliance, but it was there. It's a historical fact. It happened. And it's absolutely ludicrous that, he's being punished for reporting history. It's just ludicrous.
So in the early 30s, the idea that, I mean, that it is a historic fact, and you sound as if you know your stuff here, Matthew, so correct me if I'm wrong, round about 1932, Adolf Hitler did support a Zionist approach from the lobby that was looking for this.
Yes, to get the Jews out of Germany, because he didn't want the Jews in Germany, he wanted them out of Germany. So it makes sense that he's going to sort of, as I say, it's an uneasy alliance between Zionists who want the Jews in Israel and the Germans Hitler that didn't want the Jews in Germany. So to me, it's absolutely fallacious and stupid, to be perfectly honest, that this has even come to be. And I'd argue that it's because of, as Ken Livingstone said in there, it was essentially a witch hunt against Jeremy Corbyn, because he's pro-Palestinian, you know what I mean? Like, and he believes in the rights of the Palestinian people to live in their land.
Sure.
And
is it possible?
It's an affront to the Israeli lobby, which has massive power.
Of course.
We can all easily look across the Atlantic and say, right, there it blatantly has power. It still has it here. It's just not quite as blatant. So we had a massive purge of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, saying they're all anti-Semitic, and now the Labour Party's been forced to a position where they have to basically get, slap on not even on the wrist, on the face, a very prominent individual, because we've got a media environment that's, to be honest,
well, hang on, forget the media environment. What about Labour MPs like Luciana Berger, a Jew herself, saying this is a new low for my party?
I'll be honest, there's a lot of people within the Labour Party that I'm at odds with, because one, if you're a member of an organisation, you don't go out in the public and wash the laundry. That's just a simple matter of professionality. It's that simple.
But there is a view there, isn't there, that there is an anti-Semitic problem in the party. There appears to be too many incidents.
Where's the evidence? I know there's lots of stuff in the media, but where is
what have we got, 50-odd, 60-odd people currently suspended by the Labour Party for exactly this?
50-odd people out of 500,000. That's an unconsequential amount. That's probably something that parallels, the population of the country, which is what the Labour Party is made up of. It's a ridiculous notion. It's a talking point.
It is. We're not just talking about people. We're talking about people who have usually some position within the Labour Party in some respect. I mean, not just somebody who happens to be a member that doesn't like Jews. We're talking about people who might be councillors. They might be people who hold some level of office who've tweeted very publicly about what they think of Israel and the Zionist conspiracy and the like. So, I mean, we can't run away from that one, Matthew. Come on.
We're not running away from that. I would point out something that you mentioned yourself earlier, is this conflation of Israel and Judaism. They are not the same thing.
Agreed.
A lot of people that turn around and say, it's an apartheid state as Israel will be branded as, anti-Semites. It's nothing to do with anti-Semitism.
No, you're right. You can be completely and utterly against the every sinew of Israel's foreign policy and not be an anti-Semite, of course.
Yeah, but what's been said was not by Ken Livingstone was not anti-Semitic. It was a historical fact. Yet we've ended up in a situation whereby he's been removed from the party or from standing from office for the next year because of the witch hunt in the media after the Labour Party.
Well, hang on, there isn't. There's no witch hunt in the media. That's just you're just sounding like listen. I work in the Matthew. It's a very interesting story that the media would follow. But the idea that the media have sat down and said, well, let's try and create this narrative in order to get that's just nonsense. I mean, I work in this industry and it simply doesn't.
You may well work within the industry. You work within one small sector. You mean it's an entirely large media.
Well, but I also work in other parts of it, and my circle, if you like, if that's the right way to put it, includes people who do as well. So, I mean, that's just a conspiracy theory. You sound a bit like David Icke here, Matthew.
You see, you're using strawman arguments, which is below you by the way.
What's the strawman argument there?
You're saying that I'm a conspiracy theorist.
If you're saying you said there is a media conspiracy against Ken Livingstone or against the Labour Party. There isn't.
Well, I'd argue that they are. It's not a conspiracy when there's a simple fact that 85% of the media stories about Jeremy Corbyn have been negative. It's not a conspiracy. That's a verified fact.
No, it's not a verified fact. That's not a verified fact at all. It's taken on a very narrow sample of people, one person or one group's idea of where you should look to see whether stories about Jeremy are positive or negative. Somebody came up with that statistic. The very thing you're saying to me here about Jeremy Corbyn and Labour is exactly what UKIP supporters say about Nigel Farage. I find that rather interesting. Matthew, I hate to step in because you'll think I'm trying to curtail your free speech here. I promise you I'm not. But we're hit by the clock. But thank you. That goes into other territory, I guess. Ken Livingstone, not an anti-Semite, but he has been suspended. He'd been suspended. He has now been told he cannot hold office for another year over comments he made about Adolf Hitler and Zionism. The disciplinary panel upheld 3 charges of breaching party rules. I'll chat to Dave in Croydon in just a second on this one. Is a suspension of being able to hold office the right decision? What do you think this decision says about the Labour Party? Matthew in Lancashire there saying that he believes there is almost a mobilised attempt, an agenda to destabilise the Labour Party. Well, if there is, it doesn't come from the media, as if that's all one big thing anyway. We'll chat to Dave in Croydon and get some views on that in just a second. You can tweet at LBC or text 84850. You're listening to Late Nights with Ian Collins. It's LBC.
This Late Nights with Ian Collins on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
We're fascinated by the media conspiracy thing, and that gets into the whole Jewish thing as well, which perhaps that is the area that I think some people, Ambrosine, our first caller, not everybody agreed with her, but I wonder whether there is a certain loose tone with which people talk about Judaism, Jews, Israel and Zionism in a kind of a very casual, dismissive, that lot type way. It might not specifically mean that there is a specific anti-Semitic comment within it, but there is a sort of a generalisation, a stereotype. That lot, they're all powerful, all bankers, they're all running this, they don't care about Arabs. That's what I think some people are seeing Ken as one of that lot. You know, the kind of, when you get the racist kind of guy, you know, that wants to sort of bore you stupid about how, you know, well, you know, most black people are all right, but it kind of that territory. Is that what you consider Ken Livingstone and that ilk, or that part of the Labour Party, are more guilty of? Rather than a specific David Irving type, the Holocaust didn't happen, etc. Is it more the kind of casual, dismissive, irked response to Israel, Judaism and Jews? Is that what we're probably dealing with? I wonder. It was the Remember the Evening Standard prison guard comment some years ago in that department. Dave's in Croydon. Hello, Dave.
Hello, evening.
Hi.
I think one of the problems is the current atmosphere of the leaders of the Labour Party. I want to say the leaders. The Labour Party has been hijacked by, in all intents and purposes, a socialist element, and that socialist element is very, very opposed to certain elements of what's going on in the world. So
particularly Israel-Palestine, of course.
Yeah, well, so they will be opposed to America because they'll equate that with the capitalist world, and Israel, which is the only democracy in the Middle East, which has got a connection to America, falls into that category. So immediately, there's people like Corbyn and Livingstone, they're going to say anything connected to America must naturally
You are right.
be
You are
bad.
right. You've got nutty leftists who are more offended by Israel than they are of Saudi Arabia chopping people's heads off for wearing a skirt that's too short. So
100%.
There is that.
100%.
There is that group of people out there. You're right.
And I think that's what they do. So they will. So, and the other thing is about the left. They've got this buzzword Zionism, when they don't even understand what the word Zionism is. What they do is they connect it with fascism or secularism or non-mixing around. Zionism is purely a desire by the original children of Israel to get back onto the land that they originally inhabited through the Bible 2,500 years ago. And that's all it is. It's a desire of the Jewish people to get back onto that land. It doesn't mean that they are exempting other people. If you go to Israel today, there are 1 million Arabs that live a lot better off in Israel than they do in all the Arab countries combined.
We do a lot of phone-ins, Dave, on this programme about how people misplace the word racism. It's almost a national sport right now in the way that it is. Yes, it's an industry as well, and of course it's above and beyond anything else. It's offensive to the genuine issue and the serious issue of racism. It kind of undermines, if you like, the more serious and robust debate around that. Similarly with this, do you think people are sometimes casual with their language when it comes to this whole issue of Israel, Judaism and Jews, and that's often misconstrued as being anti-Semitic when in fact it's perhaps more dismissive? I think Ken might be a bit dismissive. I'm not sure he's an anti-Semite.
I think the way they operate, the left currently operates, they insult the concept of real racism by creating racism that sometimes doesn't exist in the world. And I think that Israel, connected to Jewish people, are always going to be drawn in by the... I mean, let's not forget, Livingstone had meetings with the leader of Hamas. I mean, I don't know what that was all about, but if he was really about peace, why would he be speaking to someone who's a terrorist organization? I mean, that's...
Well, my own view on that is that, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell and the like had, met with the IRA and the like, and some people will say that is a progressive move. How else do you get peace? And others will say that it's very much a politicised statement and in their blood to kind of do, if you like, what goes against the status quo. Dave, thank you for that. 0345 6060 973. It's interesting that Ken... Was he suspended, or when I put it to him, I said, "You've been suspended." He said, "No, I haven't been suspended. It's not a suspension. I just can't stand for office for another year." But he's still a member of the Labour Party, and I think he can still vote as well. So that doesn't really caricature itself as a conventional suspension. However, he can't hold office. So that's the bit. So if you like, he's been suspended from holding office, but he's not actually suspended from the whole shebang. He's still very much there. He was in breach, and I wonder whether this was the NEC needing to be seen to take some kind of action. Imagine what Luciana Berger would have been saying if they'd done nothing at all. Because Ken is totemic, of course. He is, for Ken Livingstone, read Jeremy Corbyn, read George Galloway. He's, part of that, if you like, that trilogy of left-wingism that many of us sort of associate with. Certainly when I first got interested in politics, it was, they'd already been around for some time at that point, but it was that was a specific plank, if you like, of the, unfortunate turn of phrase, specific facet of the Labour Party, the sort of Ken, the Corbyn, the Galloway type group of people. So if you look at that element and imagine nothing happening over this, imagine there being no response from the NEC, then that would have been... that would have been explosive. So Ken is totemic because and of course former mayor of one of the biggest cities in the world, London. They needed something. So why has he been told he can't hold office? Well, following the disciplinary hearing, it was Labour said that Ken had breached Rule 2.1.8, which says that no member of the party shall engage in conduct which, in the opinion of the NEC, is prejudicial or in any act which, in the opinion of the NEC, is grossly detrimental to the party. So the fact that he engaged in a conversation about Adolf Hitler and theorised about Zionism, which wasn't, by the way, a theory, it was just actually a statement of fact, and then talked about killing 6 million Jews, the fact that he kind of entered into that discussion, although he claims and says, understandably, it wasn't him that sort of brought that up. The interviewer brought that up, and he merely responded. But the idea that he got involved in that was the reason why he's now been told that brings the party into some kind of, grossly detrimental to the party, their words. Well, yes, no, maybe, perhaps. That's as near as I think they could get to making some kind of case of Ken Livingstone. Had they not done that, then what Jeremy Corbyn's got coming in next month's council elections would have probably got triply worse overnight, I think. Don't go away, Luke, with you in a second. This is Charles in Enfield. Hello, Charles.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening to you. What are your thoughts?
Well, can I just say, first of all, I'm glad that Ken has effectively been exonerated. Quite frankly, I don't think he should even have been suspended. At the end of the day, there is nothing wrong with healthy anti-Zionism. That does not equate to anti-Semitism. And I think even the NEC now accept that. Look, as far as I'm concerned, it's been mentioned by one of your callers before, this is a deliberate and concerted attack on Jeremy through Ken and any other member of the Labour leadership that supports Jeremy. Look, this is not the first time those with this agenda have sought to set Ken up in this way. You yourself mentioned the Evening Standard scenario. Yeah. That was a setup, wasn't it? A taped phone call and then blowing it up out of all proportion. Ken Livingstone is
what was it? He said to a Jewish journalist that he may or may not have known whether he was Jewish. You're just obeying orders or something, didn't he? Or something of that nature.
Yes, but look, it was nothing. There was nothing in it which was anti-Semitic. Of course, if there were, then I'm pretty sure that they would have tried to get him.
Could he be a casual? Could he be one of those casual anti-Semites that I keep referring to, Charles? I don't want to in any way try and categorise, if you like, and say that there are various types of anti-Semites. You know, you're either anti-Semitic or you're not. But there are people who are just a bit loose and casual with their tongue when they talk about certain issues. Could it be that he's a bit like that he doesn't like Israel very much, and he doesn't, you know, the whole Palestine, it annoys him. It annoys him that half of Hollywood is run by powerful Jews, and therefore he has that kind of niggling sense that there is a kind of big cartel of powerful people, all Jewish, that are chipping away at society. So he's annoyed by them, but not clearly all of them, because that would just be stupid.
He's entitled to be annoyed by those who are rabidly pro-Zionist. Yeah. Look, Zionism, in its purest form, has a lot wrong with it. And I personally am also anti-Zionist, but certainly not anti-Semitic. There is plenty wrong with the state of Israel, the way it was created. You've just had a caller referring to terrorism. I mean, if you look at the history of Israel, it was created. You must know about the Camp David Hotel, yes, and the King David Hotel, and the origins of the creation of the state of Israel. You see, the fact is, we can get into an argument about Israel and its origins and the principles of anti-Zionism. That doesn't make me an anti-Semite.
Fair point. Charles, I have to cut in there. Great call, though, sir. Thank you. I'm going to talk to Luke in just a second as well. Lots more to come on this. I think the question is, well, the issue is just wider than, Ken Livingstone obviously has, this evening is big news. He's a big player in the Labour Party. He's never really gone away. He's a huge face, some might say, less significant than he once was, but still, a pretty big part of the Labour Party as it is today, more so than he has been for many years. So they haven't dismissed him. They haven't said, get out, you're not wanted around here. They've simply said you can't stand for office for another year because you've got into discussions you shouldn't have got into. So you've breached Rule 2.1.8, I think it was. No member of the party shall engage in conduct which could bring the party into disrepute, to paraphrase their clause. That's what he's done. He got involved in a conversation, should have got involved in. Was he an anti-Semite? No evidence as far as they're concerned for that. Luciana Berger and others in the Labour Party, high-profile politicians, very upset by this. They thought it should have gone further. But if there's no evidence, what do they do? Or is there? Is there evidence? The wider question is about the Labour Party, about Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, and whether you think there is. Clearly there are a disproportionate amount of people who they've discovered have been tweeting and saying things that perhaps you could construe as because if you said it about any other race, you might find yourself in hot water. So it's been dealt with accordingly, and people have been suspended or called into question. So is there no issue, nothing to see here at all? No, that would be silly. That would be really silly to suggest that. Is it a case that Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party is riddled with overt anti-Semitism? That would equally be as daft. The truth usually sits somewhere in between. Let's go back to the other issue, talking of free speech and what you should and shouldn't be allowed to say. Ken Livingstone spoke to me earlier here on LBC just after the NEC announced that he was suspended from holding office for the next year, not kicked out of the party. So he breached some guidelines, but he's not an anti-Semite. Luke is in Hemel Hempstead. What are you making of this, Luke? Good evening. The ramifications, of course, are far beyond just Ken Livingstone. Hi.
Hi, Ian. Great show. Really interesting debate. It's an interesting point on freedom of speech and sort of discreditation. I suppose, in my experience, discussion diffuses tensions and lack of communication fuels the frustration. I think labels such as anti-Semite or racist or sexist tend to shut down debate, and it's not really helpful because silly opinions tend to get shot down and look really stupid. So you don't need to use these labels half the time. I tried to understand the definition of anti-Semitism because I was trying to understand what Ken was accused of. And one item on there was, for the working definition, was anti-Semitism is accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group. And so there's 20 to 50 people in the Labour Party that have been stand accused or found guilty of this. And it's being applied that the Labour Party has a problem with anti-Semitism as a result. And it's kind of Labour's being sort of discredited in a similar way that is unacceptable via those definitions. These are problems with individual people, and they are on a case-by-case basis. Other parties, do they sort of clamp down on this? Is there any scrutiny on those? Because I think Labour tends to go with sort of oppressed groups, and right-wing groups tend to support allies of the country. So is this highlighted on Labour because they're more supportive of Palestinian people?
Maybe there's something in that. I'll tell you what, Luke, let me just bring in Graham in Leeds, because, Graham, you might be able to help out with what you see as the definition of anti-Semitism, which is the point that Luke raised, because you're quite disappointed that Ken's not been removed from the party. Hello.
Oh, yeah. But I don't want to get into discussions about details about labels like anti-Semitism. We've just heard enough from Kath and how you can start from that and make an inverted pyramid. What I wanted out, Ken's got previous. He made the remark to a Jewish journalist that he'd make a very good trustee in a concentration camp. Then he stood against the...
well, hang on, didn't he say... Didn't he say, are you obeying orders or something? Was that the guy to the Evening Standard a couple of years back?
Well, he was a Jewish
journalist. But whether Ken would have known he's a Jewish journalist was always the question, wasn't it?
I believe that it was, that he said that you'd make a good trustee in a concentration camp. Now, it's the whole cumulative thing about Ken Livingstone I don't like. And it's the offence that he gave. I'm in Leeds here, and there's a large Jewish population, as you know, which is very, very much under threat all the time from various angles. As you know, the rising anti-Semitism. And
so what did Ken say that was anti-Semitic, though?
Well, he used that trustee. Now, a trustee was, if I'm right, trustee in a concentration camp. And...
right. You're talking about comments from many years ago here, as distinct from what the NEC were examining.
Well, the NEC is looking at one particular area of it, and they've gotten away with giving them the minimum that they could get away with, it seems to me. Now, there is a feeling in the party, that there is an element entered into the party which is anti-Semitic. Ruth Sneal, Luciana Berger.
So why does somebody like her think he's anti-Semitic, but other people clearly don't share that same view? It's down the middle, this one, Graham.
Well, it's a little bit of a grey area in that I don't exactly know what Luciana Berger thinks. So
well, she thinks he should have been kicked out like you think he should have been kicked out.
Well, yeah, but is she saying he should have been kicked out for the same reasons I'm saying he should have been kicked out?
Well, we would have to speak to Luciana and specifically ask her if it's exactly the same reasons. But I think you do share the broad overview, Graham, that Ken Livingstone is not in a good place on this one, and thank you for that. Great calls, and we could have run with 2 or 3 different debates in that hour, certainly when we had our little interlude there talking about the Jenny Murray gate.